So this is the change in technology. That's always a problem. But everybody, welcome. Welcome to the first Change Talks. My name is Margot, and I'm the founder of the Change Awards. I'm going to quickly go around the table just to introduce everybody. But first of all, I wanted to say big thank you to the Investigo and the In-Group and Karen on my left-hand side, who are always supporting us, and they have enabled us to have this fantastic session for you. Also, before I start, what we have designed from the tech perspective is that if you wanted to ask us a question or ask anybody a question in this room, just type the question into the chat box. And then obviously Ashley is going to manage those questions, and then we will get answers for you. So on my right-hand side, I've got Karen. She's the head of corporate change for the BAE Systems, and she is going to lead and host the event for us. And we've got also Karen from Investigo and Ashley from Investigo, Thomas and David, 2 judges, and Mark and Liam, 2 winners. Over to you, Karen.
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for obviously all the judges, the winners, Karen and Margot for coming in today. And obviously everyone who are on the screen right now, tuning in and being part of this exciting session. We're really thrilled to be part of this and helping elevate the change profession and being part of this amazing journey. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you everybody for inviting me to host the very first Change Talks. So I'm hoping that if we do a good job today, you'll invite me back. If I don't get invited back, then obviously I'll understand why. So I think really what was probably the best suggestion is to get straight on with it and to introduce our winners of the Change Awards. So we have Mark and we have Liam here. So I think what everybody would really like to understand, first of all, is your personal change journeys. So if you could perhaps give us a little introduction and a little bit about your personal change journey, then that would be great. So I don't know who wants to start first.
Thank you. Yes, so really, I wish I could say it was by design that I went into change management. I think it was probably about 20 years ago now. I was really introduced to my first assignment from a change management perspective, and it was long before it was actually called change management. It was a project or something that needed to happen very quickly. And I was working as a regional general manager for a retailer at the time, and they were implementing a new operating structure for operations, and they'd just done at the time, it was quite a state-of-the-art piece of work to look at the customer journey mapping, and they wanted to basically bring the two together. And I worked on that for about 9 months, and that really sort of whet my appetite in terms of, okay, this is very dynamic, fast moving, very complex, lots of stakeholders to manage. And that really gave me the bug then to go into change management as a career. And in 2006, I was fortunate enough to lead a global change program, actually based in Germany, working very, very closely with the UK military. And that was probably the most expansive organisational change programme I've done to date. Not necessarily in terms of size and scale, but just the diverse nature of the changes that were included. So it had contractual SLA negotiations, new target operating model design, new systems, new customer proposition. It really was expansive. And ever since that day in 2006, I've not really looked back. So I wish I could say it was by design. It wasn't. But once I had that change bug, it's still running strongly through my veins.
So more by default than design.
Absolutely, yes.
So yeah. Something that obviously means something to you as a career, something that you're really obviously very passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. Very passionate, and I think it's great to see the fact that we're here today talking about the Change Management Awards, change management as an industry and sector. I think that just demonstrates how far the sector has come in the last 10, 15 years, where it was probably talked about in discrete sort of silo groups of individuals locked away underneath the stairs, and then now it's out in the open forum. So no, it's great to see that we're here today, and hopefully this is the foundation for a lot more of these type of events.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark. Liam?
Yes, so Liam Crosdale, very similar to Mark, was purely by default. I actually started off wanting to become a wedding planner, so I so random, literally so random. And then I was a project coordinator for a period of time. So I thought, okay, I've got the organisational skills down. Decided to do a master's in programme and project management because there was no qualification for wedding planning. And it wasn't until my dissertation that I discovered the soft skills of project management. So I started to scratch the surface, and then I uncovered this thing called change management. Never heard of it, wasn't exposed to it, realised I started to do bits of it in my previous organisation. So that's how I came about change management. So then I applied for a role at a company called National Grid. They were going through a UK operating model change, which was one of the most significant changes of its time. And they were looking for a business change analyst. So that's where I really got my experience. And again, similar to yourself, once I really just delved into it, got an understanding of what change management was about, I realised it was my passion. And essentially, I've just built my career on it ever since.
Fantastic. Once in change management, always in
This is it, exactly.
I just, it's interesting because I wonder about, everybody in the room and the audience as well in regards to change management. I suspect that a number of us have done roles before where actually we have been dabbling in change management or even doing a full-time change management role, but it's not part of our title or not recognised. Maybe that's something we can ask the audience as well as to whether that's something that they've experienced. I don't know, anybody in the room, is that your experience at all?
My first role in change wasn't even called change because they didn't to scare people. It was called user engagement because apparently that was less threatening than change manager. And just realised about a month and I was like, oh, this is change. Don't know about anyone else.
Same.
Yeah.
When I was a program coordinator, I was designing comms, I was doing the stakeholder management, didn't realise what it actually was in terms of change. And it wasn't until I got into a change role that I identified it's actually one of our key deliverables. Again, I was referred to as a program project coordinator at the time. So yeah,
so that's why it took you.
Yeah.
So what would you say is what really sort of thrills you about change management? Why change management? What's the thing that really gives you that buzz around this is something that I want to do?
So I think for me, it's the sheer diversity of day to day. You generally never know what you're going to face, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. But I use the analogy: you get up in the morning, you're having a conversation about a specific process challenge that you need to resolve. Then at lunchtime, you might be having a conversation with some stakeholder groups where you're trying to get them to buy in, support the vision of the change strategy and plan. And then in the afternoon, you might be, solving some issues that have come up throughout the day. So I think it really is diverse in its nature. No day is generally ever the same. Certainly not in the 20 years that I've worked in it. And I think there's a couple of things that really stand out for me. Firstly, stakeholder engagement. Just really, I've been fortunate enough. I've lived in a couple of places outside the UK, and I've experienced different cultures. And working across different cultures is really interesting. That's something that still fascinates me to this day. And certainly, if there's any relationship between organisational culture and organisational change management performance, is something that really does interest me. And I think the final piece, which probably links to my award, is actually when you can see tangible growth and development in individuals who may have come into the sector quite early on. So one of the case studies that I submitted for the Change Awards was it was a global transformation programme, and we were in the execution phase of the programme from a change management perspective, and I needed to bring some resource in to effectively execute the plan. Like most individuals and organisations, we find ourselves in budget is always a challenge. There's always a reason you can't have that additional resource that you want. So if I'm honest, I took a bit of a punt, and I brought in two individuals who were, I would say, entry change management professionals. They'd been through structured change management training delivered by Melanie Franklin, so I knew they came from a really good stock of people. So that really gave me some confidence. So that was a massive tick in the box. And then I met these two guys, and they just had this almost unrivaled hunger to learn and develop and grow, and over time gradually sort of increased their exposure to key stakeholders. Over time got them to own certain parts of the change management delivery plan, and then to now see those individuals go on to move into a more senior role and develop their careers is actually really satisfying, because you can see that tangible growth in those individuals. And you can actually roll that up at an organisational level as well. Is for me, change is about initiating action. When people can physically see something and go, do you know what, I can see stuff's changing here. And it starts to build that momentum. And seeing that change at an individual level and an organisational level is pretty much what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Fantastic. We were talking a little bit before, weren't we, about stakeholder management as well, and some of the sort of the hurdles and challenges that you may come across with stakeholder management. And I think you mentioned before about sort of looking at empathy maps.
Yeah.
So I'd like to explore that a little bit.
Yes. So again, I wish I could say this by design. It's something that really has come more prevalent in the last 2 assignments I've worked on, where you go through your change management approach, where you map your stakeholders, you manage that aspect, and you have that regular drumbeat of communication. But what became apparent when I was talking to the stakeholders, and I kept asking fairly standard suite of questions: who do you go to if you've got a problem about this specific? And I kept getting the name Janie come up. I need to speak to this Janie. So after a couple of weeks, I spoke to Janie, and Janie was what I would call the root to the loop. She knew the business so well. She knew all the stakeholders. She knew all the processes. She'd worked in probably 12 different roles over 20 years. And having that informal influencer in the business that says, actually, we need to land this message. It's quite a difficult message. How do we get the tone, the language right, was really useful. But also to the point we were discussing earlier, Karen, about if you've got a challenging stakeholder and you're trying different techniques, actually having someone who's independent but can influence that individual was really powerful. And there was an example in the last assignment I worked on where actually that was the case. It was a particularly resistant group of stakeholders, and we've been through various approaches, time in motion studies, been able to tangibly demonstrate the benefits. Then we went through buying into the vision. This is what the 2B state will look like. And actually both failed. And having just someone that could open that door with a slightly different conversational way in enables us then to start to build that relationship. So yeah, it's something for me in terms of lessons learned I've seen become more prevalent in the last couple of assignments, and something I would definitely say, try and identify who your Janies are in the business.
Absolutely, I love that. I love that informal approach as well. Recognizing who those people, like you say, who have that influence. A colleague of mine, I remember her saying how she was able to do a lot of really good stakeholder management in Costa Coffee. So actually, that was one of the best places to do the informal stakeholder management. So I've kept that one. So Liam, I'd be really interested to know what your sort of experiences around stakeholder management.
Yeah, so very similar in terms of informal. I think that coffee chat is definitely the one to have. So what I found, especially when I was in the US, which my case study was based on, you can have a meeting, all very well, everyone agrees. It's the conversations that happen outside of the room that really matters. So catching those individuals one-to-one, really understanding some of their concerns, frustrations, and just really trying to make sure that it resonates with them, whatever these changes from a personal standpoint. So yeah, especially the informal ones, more so from a change champion, a change agent perspective, really understanding who those key people are within an organisation. And it's interesting because when we were speaking, I was thinking to myself, although I haven't formally followed a specific process, I've actually taken a very informal approach to stakeholder management.
So we actually have some questions, I think, coming from the room.
Yeah.
I've been just told.
So I can throw a few out there. So Beth Ryler has come with a question. Looking back on your respective careers, if you could do something different, what would it be?
Oh, difficult.
Your question, Beth?
With the lottery. What would I have done differently?
For me, I think it's really spending the time to articulate what change management is. What I found is I rushed too much. I rushed really quick actually into a solution and trying to move a program along or a change along. When in fact, that initial upfront, what is change management? What is the value? What is my scope? I should have really laid the foundations in actuality or on reflection. Because what I found is, especially once you're in the change, you're almost then taking a step back, and it's just counterproductive. So definitely spending the time up front, being very clear on the scope of work, the value of change management and what you're there to do is something I would definitely call out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think sort of following that thread a little bit, Liam, it is really understanding the power and importance of people. And that sounds a bit cheesy, but I'll probably say the analogy you used there was similar to myself. early on in my career, very task focused,
Yeah.
very deliverable focused, outputs, this is what we need to deliver. And probably didn't recognise or realise how important it is to bring the people on that journey. And I genuinely do believe that I think you can learn a lot from things that go wrong, probably more than you can from a project that goes well. And a couple of those little hiccups early in my career really made me realise that actually to truly embed and sustain change, you've got to bring people on that journey. And there's an interesting debate that I often have with people. We talk about bringing people on board, etc. And I remember someone saying to me once that you can change culture overnight. So this is interesting. I'm intrigued to hear more about it. Please do tell me. I've never. Okay, yeah, tell me more. And it was interesting because the individual said, well, you just tell them to do it, or you sack them. Well, I wouldn't say that's I call it behavioural compliance. You're getting someone's behaviours to comply with that is the complete polar opposite of cultural change. But for me, to summarise, learning earlier on in my career how important people are to really enable and embed change, and hope it, rather than the 35 years it took me to realise it.
The judges, I'm also interested in your views, because obviously you coming from completely different angle to the the concept of the change awards, and both of you extremely experienced as well. So
But just to reiterate some of your points, I think you're absolutely right. I think we've all done that. You've got to learn about change yourself. I think it's very important that you educate yourself. But I think we all fall victim to follow a process without not understanding the stakeholders. And I absolutely agree, and I do that a lot. I think the empathy for me is you've got to be out there. You've got to go out and talk to stakeholders. You've got to go on site. You've got to learn the language. For me, that resonates with them. But we also, from the day one, is if I want to land change, I need to have people on board. So we use a lot of innovation principles, like we do small iterations. Every time we do an intervention, we talk to people, we get feedback and say what worked, what didn't work. So back to your person who kind of understands that business, very important, because I like that ownership. Ownership has to sit with the business, not us. We're just facilitating it. So I think we have to be careful that, because we get this question all the time, which kind of system do you use? What's the kind of approach do you use? It's like, I don't really use one, because we have to be clear on what you said, Liam. We're not here. It's not the solution, it's the problem. We need to fall in love with that problem. And we solve that problem, it becomes a journey. I think that's exciting, because we need to be able to go back and forth. So just look at our own careers. It did not happen in a straight line. We're bouncing back and forth. We learn, we change. And that's the way I see change as well. So I think we need to start thinking as well. It's not just a project-driven exercise. It's now part of your day-to-day business.
I think that also leads on to just thinking about, what is business change? And I think that in itself is a big misconception around what business change is. And I know from some of my own personal experiences that sometimes it's thought of that business change means that leaders don't need to do anything, because actually the business change lead will do everything for them. So I'm just interested to know what your thoughts are around that, and any other misconceptions that you think that are out there around business change.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Loaded question.
that's a loaded question, because we could spend the whole time just talking about that. And I think it probably extends from the last question. And for me, it's about trust your guts, do the right thing. And by that, actually challenge people, push them, our sponsors, our stakeholders, people that we're working with. What was quite interesting from the award submissions I found personally was that some of the best ones were those that had reflected on what had gone wrong and what they were doing differently, and implementing and changing either now or the future. But I think sometimes we're seen as change professionals as they'll handle the comms and the training and they'll make it happen. What they don't understand is that the level of involvement needed from the organisation itself, leadership, all the way down to the individual who is changing, to become part of the change to make it successful. And that's often the first, if not the second, conversation that I have to have with people. Don't know about others.
I'd agree. I think, just reflecting on conversations I've had, I think the majority of the leaders want the change. They just don't know what it means for them. And then when they find out, I don't know if they're truly up for changing themselves. So I know my award was purely on that change coaching piece, and so much time to get them to really think about what is required of them, and what does this mean for them, both from a tangible aspect as well as from a functional aspect as well. So I would totally agree with the statement you made there.
I think what's interesting is take that a little bit further in terms of actually, firstly, getting them aligned and brought into that change. The one common misconception I hear a lot is that once you've gone live, that's done, change is done. And I always say, no, we start at the end. So we want to understand what the outcomes, what we want to deliver, what does the vision look like? Oh, yes, we'll measure ourselves against metrics and KPIs, that's a given, but what does that business look and feel like? And then you work back from that. And I was saying, we were talking earlier actually about preparation for change and readiness activities. And I think we all recognise, working in change management, there's a lot of positioning, alignment that you need to do early on to get that preparedness and readiness for change. Absolutely, and that's a key part of what we do. We need to be able to understand the change, why is it changing, articulate what that means for impacted stakeholder groups. But actually, once we've gone live, that's when we really put our steel to work in the fact that our role is about embedding that new way of working into the DNA of the very fabric of the business, so that they couldn't do anything other than this new way of working. So it doesn't become the change or the transformation. It's simply, this is now the way that we operate. And I see even now a lot of senior individuals that I have conversations with say, well, you go live on this date, so that's when you guys end. No, that's when it starts. And actually, the test from a change perspective is we walk away, and that process continues as normal because it's been embedded into that DNA of the business.
And that has to start very early on in the process.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
something that you do at the end.
Yeah.
It's something that you do at the beginning. You
Yeah.
plan for that and ensure that that's
Yeah.
there. That's very interesting. I know Beth on the call and I, we were constantly saying that we're not the only players on the pitch, which kind of like links very much to your piece around, actually there's a number of people that actually help embed a change. We have a part to play. And I think it's very easy as well that sometimes we feel like, we've got to do everything ourselves and take that on. So I just wonder, how do you deal with that? Because obviously if the eyes are at you, you're the person that's going to make this change stick and embed this change. How do you deal with that expectation? What have your own experiences been?
So for me, I like to up front when you initially go into the role and you start to understand your stakeholders, it is have those white of eye conversations where you collectively align and agree what the expectations of those individuals are. And let's be honest, it's never a one-time hits all. It's a repetitive process, or management by persistence, as I like to call it. And it is about setting those expectations early on, because if you don't, the expectation is you've got the brand change lead, head of change, whatever it is, you're accountable and responsible for that change. And I've seen that early on in my career. We talked about lessons learned, and that's another one, is getting that absolute clarity and alignment as early as possible, not only in terms of what the expectations of those stakeholders are to deliver, but also getting that alignment on the end vision piece as well. Because you can often get to the stage, and I've seen it through programs where there hasn't been that 100% alignment at the start in terms of, okay, I know what's expected of me, but you've got slightly different interpretations of that end vision. And you get there and you've got three people say, oh, this is great. And there's one person like, well, I'm not sure this is what I bought into. So I think it's about doing that up front, managing expectations, being clear on what's required, what isn't, and also just doing that sense check to make sure that's the vision we're aiming for, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, good.
So just building on that, so I've taken a very practical approach to something very similar, where we've looked at squads. So we've looked at the capabilities that are going to be needed to drive this change forward. And for each of for example, our HR business partner, corporate comms maybe, the sponsor and so forth, the program manager, and we're all very clear in terms of what are we bringing to the table and what does that look like. So yeah, I think clear expectations and roles are absolutely key. I know I mentioned earlier in terms of that change management activity or awareness up front. And I think to your point, in terms of the ownership being on the change or the people, depending on how they brand it, I think calling that out, like, this isn't for me to deliver, I'm happy to facilitate, but this is for the sponsor, the business, the function, whatever it may be, to actually land this change within their business area, and just having that upfront early conversation.
I think we need to be careful as well. And so just building on what you said about business change, I absolutely agree. We need that vision. I think sometimes we overcomplicate what that vision looks like. And in my over 20 years in change, it's never going to be delivered. So I think we need to work a lot more with leaders as well. Is what if this is not going to happen? Can we pivot very quickly? Because we also learn. So I think we need to have this validated learning process embedded into this, because are things that so I normally break it down and say the business change, that's fine. Let's go back to the compliance issues you talked about. What about the people change?
Yeah.
It's so you need, for me, you need to break it into two different parts, but we need to be very agile in the sense that if it's not working, because also the world around us changes all the time.
Yeah.
So how can we kind of adjust? So I spend a lot of time with businesses and get them to think about minimum viable products.
Yeah.
What is the minimum we can get away with so it can still operate? And then we need to start thinking about continuous improvement. And that's where, for me, the business needs to start to get involved and take ownership. So it's not just about having a whole team of practitioners in there. How do we upscale the business? How do we get that ownership?
That's actually an interesting point. And I think it goes back to something that we've spoken about in terms of change maturity or business change maturity. And as change professionals, I know we often meet our stakeholders where they're at. There is that bridging in terms of where we actually need them to operate and what does that capability build look like. So I totally agree. But for example, an organisation that isn't particularly mature either in project management or change management, they may not have the capabilities to adjust an agile way of working. So again, I guess the key message there is, yes, we definitely can identify that gap. We should definitely be speaking with our sponsors, but just being realistic in terms of where that business is and where their level of maturity is.
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really good point. And just building on what you're saying there as well around the whole vision. And I think obviously this is where change leadership is a massive catalyst, I think, to what we do. The ability of leaders to be able to take that vision, to be able to articulate it in terms of what is the job to be done for their team is absolutely crucial if we are going to embed any change and make it stick. So I think that's something we really need to keep an eye on. Interesting as well, we talked about some of the things that are happening around us. I'm just wondering about how you see the advances in AI, in technology. How do you think that might impact the change management profession?
So interesting. I attended a Warwick Business School conference weekend just gone, and it was on AI. And the group that I was in was medical area, and they were talking about doctors having these like smart AI, they refer to it, where they were talking about can AI replace doctors? And my key thing was around empathy. As a change professional, that's my first goal to, like, can you demonstrate the level of empathy? And they were playing around, the coaches were playing around and doing the scripts, and it was like a real conversation. They played a few videos of elderly patients engaging with this AI person, and I was like mesmerized at how engaged these patients were with this AI, and it got me thinking, oh, could AI potentially, because I've always been under the understanding, oh, AI is not going to take over like my job. I know there's some jobs that they'll take over, but are they really going to come for change management? And that was the debate in the room, just in terms of how smart AI is advancing, and is that something that could potentially, is AI something that could potentially
I'd say,
for the change space?
I'd say good luck to AI. If you ask ChatGPT to write a code, it's the most hilarious thing, because it will give you a process to follow. I think it's a very linear process.
Pointless, like,
What I'm seeing from a workplace technology space perspective is that the introduction of something like Copilot from Microsoft is not, it is a change, but it's a nudge. It's something that is going to be introduced into the platforms and systems that we already have. So when it comes to supporting people, they're going to need change support to help them understand what's in it for them,
yes,
the benefits around it, and actually how to get the most out of it. Otherwise, if you're spending $30 per user per month on something, that's a really high cost to bear for an organization. And you need to get the return on investment from that. And let's be honest, the macro press and media attention that AI receives from a workforce redundancy productivity point of view, there's going to be really high resistance. And actually, the communications and awareness around that needs to be strong enough to support. But I think it can help us as practitioners and professionals if it is utilised and acted on in the right way. But where it's exactly going, no one knows.
I think it's a journey.
Regulations.
I think it's a journey at the moment. I'm quite intrigued by it. I really like what you said, Liam, but it's the way I look at it, because it's also going to create a lot of interesting data. But I've been in too many organizations that, oh, we got this real-time data and it's going to tell us what to do. I said, no, it's not, because it's not going to empathize with our users or with our stakeholders, but it should just enable us to ask more interesting questions. So we should be able to pick up trends a lot quicker than we do today. You know, and I think that's back to my point before. Continuous improvement and AI, I think that's going to go more hand in hand. So it's not necessarily just going to be project-driven exercise, but it's something we just need to learn, live, and adapt to. But I think, yeah, I think from a practical perspective, how we can use AI, I can see the potential, but I still think we're all learning.
But even generally, like technology is growing on a day-to-day basis. So the introduction of new tech that is being introduced into organisations is continually growing, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So I think there's definitely going to be a demand for change professionals to support colleagues, adapt. And I know something that's particularly passionate to me is around that generations within an organisation and how do we cater or how do we align our change efforts to each of the, you know, I don't want to be stereotypical, but just aligning those efforts to the diverse group of colleagues within an organisation.
Yes, that's a really, really interesting point about the generation piece, because I actually worked on an AI program. So it's actually supporting the COVID vaccine. And there's two elements to it. Firstly, the AI in terms of functionality pretty much blew my mind, but I am somewhat of a technological Luddite, so I can confess, you know, I do confess now. But to your point about the generation, it's about also looking at from the user's perspective, that user journey, because whilst this technology blew my mind in the fact that it could look at unstructured data channels, so email, tweets, messages, and actually interpret whether there's a product quality complaint, a medical information request, and then feed that into a back-end system. That from a process perspective, you're like, wow, this is quite powerful. But then you actually look at it from the user perspective, and you actually look at some of the user profile, and you think, again, not stereotyping, but if you look at certain age categories, you think, well, actually, is there going to be trust and integrity in the way that this is going to operate? And it was no surprise when we had to engage with the MHRA that they went through it with a fine-tooth comb, somewhat of an understatement. But for me, I think I've seen where AI can absolutely transform processes.
Yeah.
To your point about that empathy and that personal touch, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's there.
So it sounds like what we're kind of saying is almost like there's two areas to this. There's one, actually, it might be really useful for us in our professions. We don't know quite what that will be yet, but obviously having more data, being able to analyse it, might be able to give us more data-driven decisions that we can make, which obviously could be a good thing. But also equally, with all the advances in technology, we're probably going to require more change management to actually help people through all this change. So obviously we've chosen the right profession, which is
There's quite a few.
We do have we do have quite a few. Anything that we don't get to in this session, we will come back post this session. So thanks everyone for sending them through. So as you mentioned, change management leadership, where do you recommend change management sits in an organisation and what works best? So for example, Centre of Excellence, HR, PMO, what's everyone's experience?
I don't think it matters. A change manager is a change manager, and you're implementing a change across an organisation. Often you need a sponsor who you have access to at the right level. Often C-suite is ideal, but we don't always get them. And actually, it's about managing up and down. So structurally, where you sit shouldn't matter. It's about how you take that and mould that into what you need it to be.
So I've had experiences of sitting within, for example, HR. I've been moved around quite a bit from HR to the function to the program management. And what I would say is, from a functional perspective, we've had a broader reach. We've had consistency from a change delivery perspective. We've had a sponsor that's been great. When I was sitting within the program team, I felt that I couldn't really execute change. So my program manager didn't really get it. And that was a big concern for me because I was aligning to, I was reporting to program manager. When I was in HR, again, I thought it was really good because I had a holistic view of what was happening across the organisation, but it was very siloed in that we didn't have that community of practice, that centralisation. It was very much, yes, there's change managers out there, I would speak to them, but there was no consistency. And again, I think consistency is great to an extent, but I'm very agnostic in my approach, and I think you've got to tailor whatever change you're doing per project or per function. So my personal view is, if you are executing change, you should essentially take a more centralised view, or a centralised transformation office, change management office, whatever that looks like, and partner with each of the business areas. So like a hub and spoke model would be ideal.
I would say on you, I like the community of practice because for me that's a living organism.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be static, and I think we need to be careful. We're not just developing a framework and it sits somewhere.
Absolutely.
And this is where you've got to go all the artifacts, etc. It's not going to work like this.
Yeah.
And I think we need to. And I will look back to what I said before. It's why I want the business more involved because. From my experience, if you work with the business side,
Yeah.
not everybody's going to like the transformation office because say you're enforcing something on me, but you don't understand my business.
Yeah.
You've got to have to ask me these questions. So I think in a community of practice that's cross-functional.
Yeah.
We got multiple stakeholders from leaderships to practitioners to non-practitioners. But we are learning from each other. We're learning from the mistakes. We're sharing that. We're constantly developing that mechanism. So I think that it's something that needs to be fluid and sits across your organisation.
Spoken into each of those functional areas to understand a better understanding and coming back to some type of hub to share best practice.
Yeah, I'd also suggest maybe that everybody is a change leader in their own right to a certain degree anyway. So if you look into the business and you say, well, whether you've got leadership in your title or not, you will influence people through change. So I think change leadership is something that actually is a power skill for all of us. I'm moving from power skills now from soft skills. I think sounds too wishy-washy. So we'll now call them power skills. I think that's the way power skills.
We'll do another, as I say, we'll do one last question and then we'll go back to Karen. So what has been the biggest game changer in growing your knowledge and also to influence others?
Failure. And again, it's a pretty bold thing to say. I think if we're all human beings, we all sort of have a self-awareness. We recognise sometimes we make mistakes. It's about what you take from those mistakes. Yeah, you can beat yourself up about it. It's about taking that and factoring that into your next assignment. And again, I know that sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's very easy to look at a good project. So, didn't we do that well? Didn't we do that well? But it's small incremental gains. If you can make your next program 1% more effective, and you do that, your next 10 programs, you've made some big incremental improvements. So it's about being honest with yourself. Something I've put in place for all the programs I work on, it's called an after action review, which is going through what worked well, what didn't, why do we think it didn't work well, what would we do differently, and then using that as an input for the next program.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think for me, it's that value, it's that reflection piece. Quite often it's the projects or programs that don't particularly land well that I learn the most in, and I definitely take the learnings and understand, what works, what doesn't work. But then it prompts me to think about what could I do differently, and I think that's the learning.
It stimulates that thought process. Okay, that wasn't where I needed to be. What do I need to do? And and you might connect with your network and say, this is the problem I've got. What do I need to do to get there? And I think that's where you take the value.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think something that's stuck with me for years. I worked for a client many years ago, and the only thing he was interested in is tell me your scars. I don't care about your CV. Your scars, that's the only thing I'm interested in. Because they know you can get out of a situation if you are being challenged. And I said, I had a recent client, and we did exactly that. We changed the mindset. Don't celebrate success. Of course, we need to celebrate successes, but accept that we do make mistakes. And actually, the leadership changed that. We started every month. We would celebrate things that hadn't gone well, but it's all about validating that learning. So we reflected on what we had. We went out, we shared with community. People came back with suggestions how we could improve, and then we came back with an improvement plan. So people now felt they owned it, and they also accepted the fact that I'm not going to lose my job because we make a mistake. So I think it's a quite powerful message. But I agree with you guys. I think mistakes is the only way we learn.
Absolutely.
So maybe we need to fail faster, but make sure we've got the culture that supports us when we do fail, and then learn from experience. So so some definite lessons.
Definitely learn from mistakes.
So just moving back to some of the change awards, and obviously this is something that's new for our industry. How important do you think events like this are? What are your thoughts around this?
So they're gone in.
I think it's key. I think it's absolutely critical. I'm still amazed at how many. So I volunteer in the change management space, and I think it's really it's surprising to me to hear that organisations are still asking what is change management. Like that is, an understatement. But honestly, I think raising the profile, seeing that other professions are doing this, i.e., whether it's training, program management, to have something like the Change Awards in place, significant, which is why I was so supportive when Margot suggested or mentioned the idea. And I hold it in high regards. I think it's something we absolutely need from a profession standpoint. We need to get ourselves on the map, and Change Awards is doing that.
Yeah, I totally concur with what Liam said there. I think if you go back 20 years, change was a word that was, let's say, passed around amongst a esoteric few people that were amongst themselves, hide away underneath the stairs. Now to see where it is, the fact that we've had our first UK Change Awards, we're having this conversation, I think is great testament to the work that Margot and Kieran and the Investigo team have done. So thank you, and thank you to yourself, Karen, and the judges as well. But I think this is really the foundation. This is just the start. Interestingly, Liam said something that really resonated in terms of organisations still asking what is change management. I think you're absolutely right. I still hear that. And I think it's down to us to help support, coach and educate those organisations, because I am now starting to see some organisations recognise the value of change management a little bit more and starting to dip their toe in and say, okay, let's see what this is like. And I think it's important for us to keep driving that message. So great the fact that it's recognised the efforts of what I think is a really strong network of change professionals in the UK. I genuinely do believe that. We've got some great talent coming through as well. But I really see it as the stepping stone to continual growth going forward as well.
Yeah, and just to build on both of those points, I think the other thing was not only just recognising those that won and those that were runners up, but it was also, and we spoke about this, Margot, on the night, the buzz of the room. I've been to lots of award ceremonies, and I've got to tell you, this one was one that had the best atmosphere I've ever been to. Because, I mean, for one thing, we had to put more seats on because actually everyone showed up. Events, and actually we had to find more seats. But the conversations and how people networked and connected with one another, and it was absolutely phenomenal to see, to be part of. There was such a great atmosphere, and I think that everyone left on such a high, whether you won or not, because it was just bringing together a community who, let's be honest, we work often in silos as contractors or as consultants, but when we come together as a community, we share those ideas and we help one another. And that's something that, through various forums happens, but it was great to be celebratory in that evening and in that moment. And it's carried on, with events like today as well.
No, but I'm just saying, I think we needed something. I've been in consulting more than 20 years, and I think there was no recognition of the change management and practice. And I think sometimes when you had these awards and teams are winning something, I don't think we ever talked enough about the change. So I think when I had the question when I wanted to be one of the judges, I think for me that was an easy yes, and I really enjoyed it. And I just what you said, David, is I really love the fact how people came together, but also this is an opportunity to share. Doesn't mean, because sometimes you can be quite alone out there and you do things, but I need a forum where I can share my ideas and get feedback, because we constantly learn from each other. So I think that's been brilliant, and I think we need it. And yeah, you guys are absolutely right. I think we're starting to get more and more recognition in the business, and people are starting to understand that why we're here. We're not just the ones doing the emails. We actually do more than that.
Yeah, fantastic. And Mark and Liam, obviously you went through the process and the submission and everything else. So how did you find that? Was there any sort of aha moments as you went through that?
I think I'd say the process itself was really intuitive and straightforward, but very logical and well structured. So I think the actual application process itself was straightforward and very user friendly. There are a couple of aha moments where we talked about you learn from your failures, and I think that's key. But there's also somebody, I forgot we delivered that. I forgot that was a component of that transformation. So there were some aha moments where it just sometimes reminds you of actually what that program or that specific piece of work delivered holistically. So for me, it's very, very simple in terms of, and intuitive in terms of the application process. And there are moments when you actually reflect back and almost remember stuff that you may have forgotten.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was surprised, to be honest with you, when I received but yeah, the process was super straightforward. I think the reflection piece, to your point, was good for me, just to recognise some of the work I had done, and I needed it at that moment in time, just to kind of remind myself that I've delivered and what I had delivered. So I thought that was really good, and then just picking up the learnings as well, which prompted a conversation for me and my mentor for the following week once I submitted. So yeah.
Fantastic. And what about having the award now? What has that done for you? Have you been able to use that?
Where are
On my shelf.
Yes.
In my mug.
Yeah. Well, I've got to confess, as you guys know, I wasn't at the Change Awards. I was unfortunately away working at the time in the States, and I had a message. I think it was in the middle of my time, so it must have been early morning. So it must have been a very good night. So I had someone actually collect my my trophies, and I've met up with him twice since, and he keeps saying that he's forgotten that. So I'm meeting up with him this Friday. I'm meeting up with him this Friday, and he'll be watching this. So expect those Change Awards to be in your car, Mr. Summers. Yeah.
I actually do know Mr. Summers, so.
Yes, you do.
I think as well, I mean, I know that so my colleague Beth is on the call as well. I know that Beth's been able to share that with our business and also being able to go to places like the APM conference and take her awards. We had a stand there and was able to say, look, you know, we've got these awards, which I think is a really great, tangible thing to show people. So I think, you know, that's the sort of thing we need to perhaps think about how we can really utilise this. As you say, it's part of our profession. Any other thoughts or ideas about how we can promote change management as a profession?
Keep talking about it.
Yeah, repetition.
Yeah, and I went through a phase of when someone asked me what I did, I just used to say management consultant because I just used to I can't be bothered trying to explain what I do. And I was like, well, actually, I'm doing myself and the profession a bit of a disservice. So now I actually make a bit more of an effort. But I think that's all we can do. We can keep promoting it, taking our lessons learned, applying them, you know, being the fantastic, wonderful, engaging people that we are. And that's, we just have to carry on, I guess.
Even on that, like I know we've been to Project Challenge quite a few times and looking at other professions across the industry and really partnering up with them and helping them understand. So it's all great and well, and I agree with Thomas that change management can be quite lonely, especially if you're on a program team and you're being challenged quite often. You need a community to essentially share those best practices and essentially pick you up. We're all human. But looking at other professions, i.e. there's this training conference that I'm attending and raising the awareness of change management, because what is surprising, the amount of project managers and program managers I've spoken to at Project Challenge who didn't understand what change management was, but can also relate to some of the deliverables that we do, and they're like, oh, this is change management. Oh, I do a bit of change management. It's absolutely astonishing. So to your point, I definitely think keep speaking about it, looking at diverse professions, working with those professionals and just helping them understand, because I do think we tend to lean more towards like-minded individuals or change professionals where there's a world outside of change as well, so we can definitely start.
I think I'll probably go back to empathy again. If we think about it, we need to understand the community we're working with, like project managers, etc., or the stakeholders, the sponsors. But the thing is, and I think probably falling into that trap more of us, if we start talking about what is change management and the process we're going through, I think we lose people very, very quickly, because it's a process, and it's like, hang on, how do I internalize that? How do I apply it? We spent a lot of time saying, tell me about your problems, or tell me if this happened, what would impact then be? Because now we're actually just talking about challenges. Okay, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And now we start talking about how we can help them solve these issues. And I think that's really important for me, because I always keep saying to clients that your strategy can be the best on paper. What if people are not buying into it? You know, it's like, and I think you need to give them those aha moments. And I think for me, that's the way we can promote change. So we're not enforcing it, but we need to be in curiosity. If you're not doing it, what would happen then?
So I guess it comes back to the why do it in the first place. I think we're always going back to the why. What's the outcome that we're trying to achieve, not the output. What's the actual outcome that we're trying to achieve? So that's why we need.
Because I think we start breaking out those siloed approaches. So we don't need change and project and transformation. No, we all want team.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess really sort of, you know, just sort of we're getting towards conclusion now, but I think, you know, if you were to give advice to anybody new coming into the industry, what would that advice be? I'm going to open that to the room and to the audience as well.
I can start. It's I'm a firm believer in, and I go back to what I said earlier, scarce. You know, go out, don't feel that you have to go straight into it, or you can just do a degree and then you are a professional. I think for us in change, I think you need to be curious enough. You need to go out and take the knocks and learn, you know, and then build on that. So for me, it's we need to have broader experience, not just say I read the change approach or I got myself certified. I don't think that's give you enough. I think you need practical experience.
I think curiosity is definitely something that I would pick up on. Especially early in my career, I was really bold and I would come up with all these crazy ideas. But it's failing, to your point, it's failing and failing fast. But also ensuring that you've got that support network or that culture around you to support exactly that. So yeah, being bold, being curious, and failing fast would be.
I think on that as well, because I've had conversations with people looking to take a shift into change management, and I usually find that there's some way connected with it already. It's just that they've not taken on that profession as a whole. And the advice I always give: connect to your network, like drive your passion. If they feel that passion and that engagement, they might give you an opportunity to become a change analyst on their project or get involved in some kind of way as part and parcel of your role. You know, have a conversation with your current manager within a business. Can I carve out 20% of my time to actually support this program because it's something I really want to do and what I'm passionate about? And I've seen successes of that. I've seen people completely take a complete U-turn in their career as well, because their job itself isn't change management, but they are change makers in what they do, and they've just been able to shift. Connect with your network, you know, connect with people that feel your passion and drive, and I'm pretty sure they'll give you opportunity in anything in life, right? But change management, and speaking about that as a particular subject, I think that's a good way to go.
I think also, one thing that I've noticed is that our career is not an easy career. So there's a lot of struggle, and it's a struggle on a lot of different levels, and it's, you know, within organizations, outside of organizations, however we want to put it, if it's program level, project level, individual level, because we genuinely, you know, we talked about stakeholders, and we genuinely talk about stakeholders, talk to people, and it's a one-to-one rather than there is a group, right? So whomever wants to step into that career needs to be ready, that it is, to your point at the very beginning when you said this is a daily challenge. Every day is different. Every day there is something new. So if you're looking for a career which is easy, that's probably not this one.
So I totally, and actually I'll give some great snippets of experience and recommendations. And I just want to follow on. I think resilience is important.
Oh my goodness!
How resilient working with change. Yeah, the analogy I use: in the morning you're having a conversation with a stakeholder, in the afternoon you're trying to unpick process challenges, in the afternoon you might be preparing for a go no go. It's demanding, it's tough, and I think if people have the right attitude and have that ethic, I think actually they'll really find their feet in the change management sector. And going back to the case study that I used for the Change Award, I took a punt on two individuals who had that passion. They wanted to give this a go. They done their training. They wanted to earn their scars. And now 2 years on, they've got some of those scars. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the importance of resilience, because it can be a very lonely place sometimes.
I would just say ask questions, adopt that growth mindset. And I would take what you just said on both sides. I would talk about perseverance. I'm resilient. That is not my phrase. I've taken it from a book that I've just read. But it's continuous improvement. The life to change. But yeah, you need that perseverance to carry on, to do the right thing, to work with people when you know that it's not exactly easy, and that's where that resilient element comes in, and that's how we move things forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Before we finish, just one thing, I wanted to recognize that we've got David Foster here with us as well today. So he is the head judge for the Change Awards. So thank you so much for coming and being on the camera with us, David. Very much appreciated.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I think that kind of concludes our very first Change Awards. I don't know if there's any more questions that we've got from the audience.
We have many. So we'll have to come back to them, and we will. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, yeah, so thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.